The mics will be live, so.
Yeah.
Oh, we just got something coming in.
That's right. Jerry. I'm gonna check with Brad.
Did anybody check with him? Oh,
I tried to.
okay.
It looks like we are.
Okay. He says he's getting there, so he'll be joining us shortly.
Okay.
Okay, time is now 5:36, and I'm gonna call the Board of Education part of this meeting to order.
And I'm going to represent the Board of Finance and four out of seven are present.
Okay, let's start with pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the
To
flag
the of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands.
Under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Justice for all.
As Board of Finance, this is your meeting, so you go.
It's not my meeting.
No, it's not our meeting. We're here to.
So
hear
it's
your
a
presentation.
joint meeting and
Yes.
we're happy, if you would like, we're happy to do our presentation of the Board of Education budget. And we can get started on that as soon as that comes up on the screen there. And you have your, the Board of Ed books. And we will be following along with the presentation. I'll get started while Trent's getting all that pulled up. I'm gonna start with the end of the story, and that is this year, we have a 4.94% increase year over year. It is the largest increase that we have presented in my tenure as superintendent. And that is, that's part of what we're going to be explaining this evening. We are suffering from the same thing most businesses are suffering from. It costs more to hire people. It's harder to be competitive when there's fewer people to hire, particularly in the certified staff area, which is a whole new experience for us. Inflation has had an impact. Cost of living has driven salaries up and negotiated contracts. Purchasing items and making repairs have become incredibly expensive. And at the time that, you know, like all of us coming out of COVID, we've had to spend money on academic recovery, mental health issues with students, wellness programs entirely. And I will tell you this budget began with sustained services, which is every year I ask Mrs. Pendleton to go through the exercise of identifying back in October at the beginning of our process, how much will it cost us to open the doors next year if we don't do anything different, if we do exactly the same as we're doing this year? That was actually a 5.63% increase. And I share that with you to show you that, you know, we've done a lot to make cuts and savings where we could find them before even putting this budget together and presenting it to the Board of Education. Next slide. We always like to tell you what we did with the resources that this community and the state, but mostly this community gave us last year. And we continue to spend them on a very focused, very forward-moving strategic plan which best serve our students in the classroom. Our first goal about equity is providing opportunities for all, and that can be something as simple as student athletes or students want to start a new program or extracurricular program, and we find that it is in keeping with our plan and we want to honor that, want to keep them engaged at our schools. And it can be something more complex like new programming for special education students or for students who need to be challenged more. Our second goal on high quality instruction, really a lot of that story is about the academic recovery, which we have been very, very successful in achieving in this district. But we have spent more funds than usual on programming to make that happen, including tutoring, enrichment programs. And you'll see in another slide that it has paid off really, really well for us, for our kids. And finally, safe and supportive environment. Our children, particularly the youngest children, really struggled during COVID, and the having to put programming in place for students to be proactive in dealing with anxieties and stresses that they've been dealing with, or to be reactive to things that they're demonstrating, have been a focus of our work since we reopened our schools in August of 2020. Next slide. I will not go through these all for you. I just want to point out that this is on our website and you can click on that big strategic plan progress goal 1 and you can go to all of the work that we're doing. We also have a video on that website that describes the work that we're doing specifically this year, which is the second of our 5th year in our strategic plan. But we are really, you've been hearing this, I know you've been listening to this presentation, some of you for a number of years. And we are still working to give kids those skills that employers and colleges and tech schools say that they want them to have. We want to make them independent learners. We want to make them employable. We want them to be successful in life. And we want to prepare them for a world that is probably going to look somewhat different from the one I grew up in and even the one they're growing up in. And so we find ways to make that happen even in our small district. And if you have any questions about anything you see there, I'll answer it. Otherwise, I'll go on to the next slide. Goal 2 is high quality instruction. This is the heart of what we do. And as part of our efforts, we have spent resources on professional development, on new programming, on improved programming for students, and support in the areas of technology, and as I said earlier, mental health and academic recovery. And then finally, our 3rd goal is that safe and supportive environment. We've spent a lot of time collecting data about our students to know where they are, where their struggles lie, what skills we need to give them so that they can be successful and can approach academics without anything getting in their way. And we've put age-appropriate programs in place at each level. So we're gonna take a moment to share with you some incredibly important news for the community of Old Saybrook, and that's that top dark blue square which Trent can click on. This year, 2 years after the shutdown of our schools for 3 months, we were 15th in the state on our next gen accountability scores. So everything below us we grade out because we want it to be discrete, but a lot of those communities are communities you know and are around us. There are 14 communities with better overall next gen scores than Old Saybrook. And I'd like you to take a look at those communities and you can see they are communities of means. And we're competing with, dare I say, the big dogs. Really proud of that in a year. You know where that's coming from? Okay. We're really proud of that in a year when we were so afraid that our students would still be struggling with the return. And that took a lot of work. Back to the initial slide. And then we have some things we just want to highlight from each school. Old Saybrook High School, just quickly, if you could click on there.
Sure.
You know, we have a small high school and we are giving kids lots of opportunities to be successful. And I'll show you a slide in a few that shows you where these kids go. And you can see that successful looks really different for different children. And we want to make them all feel like they're ready for whatever it is they want to do. And so there's AP courses and early college courses. And these are the high school is the most expensive per pupil expenditure traditionally, because this is where you let kids explore their interests and really have different levels of courses, different types of courses, different maths and English, because we really want them to branch out and to see what they want to do and to test it out before they spend their parents' money and go off to school somewhere. Next slide. Yeah, that one, middle school, thank you. And at the middle school, a lot of the groundwork for what happens at the high school is laid out. And we've got some really great creative things happening there. And I'll just highlight one of them. We have a local history class, and that's not even doing it justice to describe it that way. Kids get to work on projects locally, and they're pulling in skills and content area knowledge from multiple classes to work on a project. And it can be anything from like making crab traps where they have to do geometry, mathematics of different types. They have to know tech ed to do that, to studying what was here before we were here, and working like with the Historical Society to do that. But they're pulling in from so many of their classes to do that work. And that's just an example of the type of thing that we're doing to help kids develop those 21st century skills and a love of learning. Next slide, go back to the end Goodwin. And of course, at Goodwin with our littlest ones, we've had some great successes there. That school was actually named a state school of distinction this year. And we are incredibly proud of that. And that means that, you know, good test scores, great involvement in specials classes, the arts. We do it all with this age group, and we start them very, very young in pre-K. And we're very proud of the groundwork that gets laid there. Okay. One of the comments that I hear from graduating seniors all the time is, if there's something you want to do at Old Saybrook High School, everybody tries really hard to make a way for you to do it. So if you want to be, I don't know, there was an anime club a few years ago. We found a way to make that happen. We have a health club. We have it's the new one, Healthy Brain Club, that they're trying to develop. We really do want kids, if they have an interest, to have an opportunity to explore it. And fortunately, we have staff who are willing to do that work. And we can create programs or extracurricular programs around it. And of course, we've had great success with our teams, our boys soccer team, namely, very successful 4 years in a row in the state. And our social emotional learning piece, we are collecting data and utilizing that data to help kids. Doing that on a local level, and then applying programs that really help kids develop their own skill set to be resilient, to be able to be able to rely on themselves to make good decisions. And we think that that does a lot to protect them when they become a little bit more independent in the older years. Or just quickly, we just want you to know, this tells the rest of that story about our kids. We don't have one type of kid. We are a comprehensive school district. And so we have kids go to the military, they go to employment, they go to transition programs for a little bit more help. They go straight off to colleges and universities. And it's our job to get them ready for all of that. And we will, in one graduating class, send kids to Ivy Leagues, to the military, to work, to Middlesex, to UConn, and they'll make us proud. Next slide is just the rest of the kids and where they went. This is our budget development story. The reason why we have been able to keep our budgets relatively low and increase year over year is we stay highly focused on our strategic plan. We have 3 goals. Everything that we do has to move towards those goals. If it doesn't matter how great an idea it is, we're not going there. We've made a promise to the community, so we stick to our goals. And we then look at those goals, look at the needs to keep them moving forward in the following year, present those to the Budget and Fiscal Committee and to the Board of Education so they understand, you know, what it is that we need and why we're asking for it. And then, of course, all the time, every month actually, but certainly annually, we go through a full review of our enrollment, the program projections, what we're going to need there. And that's when we create that sustained services budget. And that's when we start collecting everybody's budget, because the administrators and teachers are creating budgets based on what they perceive as needs. We get them here at central office and we find ways to create savings so that we can be fiscally responsible. And of course, always discussing with the teachers and others at the school level to make sure they're involved in the process too, because they're boots on the ground. Other considerations when we are building the budget are presented there, and I'm not going to read through all of those, but there are a few I want to point out to you. The last 3 in the lighter color are things that I think it's really important for me to explain our situation here. These are all 3 decisions made at the state level by either legislators or the State Department of Education that are going to have an impact on our budget, not only in 23-24, but in the out years as well. The first one there, the new IEP plan, it's called CT-SED. This is a arguably could be a better plan. It's a better way to, it was presented to us as a better way for us to record goals for students with IEP. So these are special education students, and to be able to create meaningful action steps for these kids to help them learn better. And so who can object to that, except what they gave us as a program was piloted for a year. The districts that piloted it said, this is nowhere near ready to be used. And yet it was rolled out this year. And so we have been spending money on substitutes to free up special ed teachers to write these IEPs, because the IEPs are taking them 5, 6, and 7 hours to write. We hear rumors that there might be money coming from the state to help us, But we have put money in this budget to help teachers prep those goals because we don't want them writing IEPs. We want them with students. So there are dollars embedded in this budget because of a decision made at the state level. The next one, teacher evaluation. You may or may not know that over the last few years since COVID, there have been all kinds of opportunities for teacher evaluation to be sort of loosened up because in that first year, 2020, from March to June, how could we do final evaluations on teachers? They were home working remotely. And then the following year, because things were so difficult and so uneven, so we were open and there were districts that weren't. They basically said, you know, you're gonna slim it down and do this type of evaluation. And so I would call that a bit of a non-existent year of evaluation. They have not replaced the old teacher evaluation plan with anything new. I hear it's coming out in March and it will be in effect for July 1st. That's typically how things happen for us. At the same time, our evaluation platform that the state gave us for free is no longer supported and we won't be able to get it anymore. So we have to purchase a platform to do our technology platform to do our teacher evaluation, except we don't know what our teacher evaluation plan is going to be yet because the state hasn't told us. So we put a dollar amount in our budget and honestly, we picked one of the more expensive programs just to be safe because we have so little information to go on. That's not typically how we do business, but because we just don't know, we had to put a number in there that wasn't going to cause us to say we don't have enough to cover it. And then the big ticket item is that last one there, the science of reading K through 3. So the science of reading, you've probably heard of the reading wars. Since I've been in education, it's hotly debated what is the best way to teach reading to little ones so that they're independent readers by 3rd grade. It's been hotly debated by people in the academic world forever. At the end of the day, we discovered, it's a surprise, the best way to teach reading is all those ways. Phonics, phonemic awareness, comprehension, fluency, vocabulary. I think any solid teacher would have told you that was the case, but we've debated it for 30 years in our profession. And that's pretty much what our teachers are doing right now in our elementary school. I mean, clearly, if you're a school of distinction, you must be doing something right. Unfortunately, the legislators asked last year in an attempt to deal with the inequities in our state, and I completely understand their goal, legislated that we would all have to have programs for the science of reading. Then the State Department took that legislation and they said, you can choose from any of these 5 programs. None of them are the program we use. So they've mandated what we're going to use to teach reading. We've applied for a waiver, hoping that our program will get approved. I don't know that it will. Our program, by the way, is used by the majority of districts in the state, but we have over $100,000 in the 23-24 budget to pilot a reading program because we're just not going to accept it wholesale without having our teachers try it. And then if that science of reading waiver doesn't come through, and I'm even working with my colleagues to try to change the legislation at the state level, but if none of that happens, then there's going to be more money in the 24 budget to adopt this reading program. So these are unexpected. They tally up to some big numbers and they're beyond our control at this point. On the next slide, Pam, I think this is your slide.
All right, so the slide in front of you shows 3 distinct breakouts of our student population. So keeping in mind that we have special education, which is the IEPs we were talking about earlier. 504 students are students who have accommodations into the way that they learn, not at the level of special education, but it could be a student with attention deficit disorder and needs accommodations in testing and so forth. It could be a student who has medical injury and needs assistance in note-taking. It can be a wide range, but not as intense as special education. And then economically, we have free and reduced students. So each of those is a separate piece, and it shows you over the last 3 years, the most recent is this past fall, that our numbers are staying steady for all those areas. And it's a significant part of our population. Our free and reduced numbers seen in October were while we were still having free meals for all students. It was supported by additional funding from the state. That ended for Old Saybrook January 1st. Since that time, we have had more families apply. Because before they didn't need to apply, they were already getting free meals. So that number has probably risen back up to about that 26% that we had been seeing. After reviewing these numbers, we did have the opportunity to have our data specialist pull information that would give us a better view of if any student was either special education, 504, free or reduced, or an English learner, not a native English speaker, any one of those four, that's 44% of our population this past October. So that's almost half of our population hits a higher need category than your average student enrollment.
And traditionally, higher need means more cost to educate.
This next slide is specific to our English learner population. And what we're trying to show you is over time, the number of those students, as well as the percent of our total population, has been increasing, while the rest of our overall enrollment is decreasing. So at a higher rate. And as Jan just mentioned, those students have additional needs, additional time that we're trying to get them at a level of their peers as soon as possible. It does take additional resources, and we're also bound by certain legislation of having bilingual teachers once we have a certain number of English learners in particular buildings. And so that also grows our resources that we need to require for students. So that is continually growing year over year.
Question for you. How many of them are out of district
None,
kids that you take? These are just ours.
these are just ours. These are all Old Saybrook residents living in Old Saybrook, attending Old Saybrook schools.
I have a question for you. In the larger cities, like between Hartford and West Hartford, they have people that actually check the residency to make sure that they are really living in West Hartford, not in
We do.
Hartford.
We do. When we have families move into district, residency verification is required. So when you're newly enrolling students, we require verification of residency, and there's different documentation that can be required, and that's usually done at the building level that they're enrolling in.
Thank you.
So just to show you the numbers that go along with everything we've been talking about, Mrs. Pendleton's sustained services budget that she creates in October. Remember, that's the open the doors, do the same thing, don't create any savings opportunities, with a $29 million, $21,306, or an increase of 1.547 million, almost 1.548. And then the administrators at the same time are working with teachers and others in their building, creating their budget, and that was actually even slightly higher, and that was a 6.13% increase over the current year. And when we got done working on our budget, we brought it down below the 5%, 4.94%, or $1,356,165. I do want to, at this moment, tell you that, of course, we compare our budget to others. And superintendents talk all the time, and I've been hearing some, pretty surprising increases this year. And our DERG, which is, was at one time accurate as socioeconomically similar to us. There are 25 districts in our DERG, and there is a spreadsheet going around, and superintendents are self-reporting. Last year, the high in the DERG increase was 4.31%. This year, the high is 7.31%. Last year, the low was 1.89%. We were the second lowest last year. This year, the low is 2.87%. So this year, there's one that's got over a 7% increase. 4 towns, they haven't all reported. 4 towns have over a 6% increase. 3 towns have over a 5% increase. 2 of us are a 4% increase, only 1 with a 3%, and only 2 with a 2% area increase. So I think that this story is probably being retold in a number of places all over the state. These are typically towns that probably did not get a lot of ESSER funds, a lot of federal money compared to some of the communities that did get more. You know, have the ability, or what the arbitrators and mediators would call the ability to pay. And so are contracting for with unions at higher salaries. And in fact, that's not just a story of ability to pay, that's a story of desire to attract people, because it's not easy anymore to get teachers. It's not easy to get administrators. And I'm afraid that problem is here for a while. Mine too. And this is my last slide, and then Julie's going to talk about some numbers. We always want to show you our history of our budget requests, and we have come to the Board of Finance every year and said, we will ask you for what we need and no more. And we do a lot of work behind the scenes to bring in a budget that has trimmed things wherever possible and still move our programs forward. And so you can see we've been as low as 0.16, 0.7, and 0.24. And up until this point, our highest was 2.97 in 15-16. And this has been the highest increase so far, with good reason. You know, the same reason it's costing us more to run our homes is the reason why this number is here. Oh, I do have one more slide. And so we wanted to break down for you, where is the increase coming from? 80% of our budget is in human beings. Certified salaries rather, and benefits. And that tells the story right there. We're very fortunate. We're doing well on benefits. We're coming in at a 5% increase. Mrs. Pendleton's going to go over where we stand in comparison to the state plan, which was something that a lot of people were trying to convince us to go to. And we're doing pretty well there. But the salaries it's about competition. Supplies are up. And that's not because we're ordering more, that's because they're more expensive, and the same is true with maintenance, and we've made some cuts on things in the capital this year because we're concerned about this budget and making it reasonable. So we made cuts ahead of time, and then the all-purpose category of other.
So this is really significant because, as you can see, the 6.59% of the increase on the bottom line is $850,000 of salary money. We thought it was important for you to see how that breaks down. So the first bullet, 466,000, is primarily the newly negotiated contract with teachers. So that's a big chunk of that 850. This
And we came in below the state on that.
We did. We came in at 11.5% over 3 years, and the average settlement is at 12.03. So of the settlements that have come in thus far, we certainly came in a little bit lower than the overall average. We added a kindergarten teacher in this current year, so therefore it's reflected in this number as well, because it was not, money that was in the budget currently. So we had to include it in the budget that we're presenting.
And that was last minute enrollment.
And that was
That's
right,
good news.
due to enrollment. Yep, and we have quite a robust pre-K program as well. We had this next one is a certified BCBA, which is a position that was not a non-certified position. So this is a shift from non-certified salaries into a certified position, which was how we had to fill it. As the superintendent mentioned earlier, positions have become very difficult to fill. So we were able to do that, but we switched that account from non-certified to certified. We had some reductions in our grants, and that's, going to continue. The good news, I suppose, there is that we don't get a ton of grant money. So at a certain point, those reductions won't really mean anything because we won't have any money left. So I guess it's good in that regard that we're not really dependent on grants, but we did have some title grant reductions, as well as reduction of a grant for guidance that is expiring at the end of this year. And then you may have recalled that we have transitioned our early childhood program from a tuition paying program to a non tuition paying program, which is pretty consistent with most of all of the towns around us. So we did that over a 4-year period, so we wouldn't have the hit in any one year. So this is the last year of that funding going away, and that's that 44,000 that's represented there.
Julie, which block are you talking about
On the bottom, right in the middle.
Okay, the tuition funding.
Yeah, yeah. And then lastly is the just turnover, degree changes, we have a certified staff of almost 150 and a non-certified staff equal to that. So we have, over the year, we have people that come and go, and so we have to make those adjustments as we move along through the budget. So that gives you a bit of a snapshot of how that account increase is 850,000, which is one of the largest, obviously, in the overall budget.
Julie, is this the last year for ECP then?
Yes,
Next year it becomes tuition free,
correct,
starting in September?
yes.
Next slide.
So you have seen this slide before, and the superintendent referred to the ratio of our salaries and benefits. We're at around 78%, which is really good compared, most districts are around 80%. So what that says is we've kept our salaries at least in line and below the average. 80% is really consistent across the board. You can click on any one of those and see the detail of that. So for instance, if you click on that thank you. You'll see the breakdown of where the pluses and minuses are in that salary account, many of the ones that I just spoke about. And you can do that throughout that entire pie chart. So benefits is another one. And you can see we're up in health insurance currently. We hope that as time clicks away and months of our insurance experience begin to trend, that gets adjusted up until April or so when we finally set rates. But at this point, we're looking at about a 5% increase. We've had very, very good luck with our health insurance consortium over the past several years, and you'll see that in a slide that comes down in a couple of minutes.
Excuse me, Julie, can I say, go ahead. You have a question?
250, is that tuition reimbursement to the teachers when they take courses, or is that for students?
Yes, that's for teachers. Yeah, it's in their contract.
Any unemployment, can you explain that? Where you're at with it?
Unemployment, we pay, we don't pay a premium for unemployment, we pay per claim. So if somebody leaves us, Rick, I hate to say it, but 99% of the time, regardless of the reason that they leave us, they collect.
But you can see that's actually a positive for us this year, the unemployment.
Well, that's what I was wondering. I was
Yeah.
trying to understand what was going on.
Yeah, so we don't
Anticipate.
anticipate it because we want to keep everybody employed. Well, we need
I
them
would hope
all.
so.
And going from the COVID period of when a lot more people
Yeah.
were out and collecting. Obviously, we're having much more difficulty hiring people, so our actual experience is reflective of that. So we made that adjustment looking forward, knowing that the likelihood that we're going to be paying out on claims would be highly unlikely compared to, instead it's turned into a how can we hire people
Yeah.
problem.
A different problem.
Yeah.
The other problem that we have is, like many industries, we have a lot more absenteeism since COVID. And part of that is the way we're treating sick people. We're saying, listen, if you have COVID, we don't want you here. We can't have you infecting kids, and you have to be home for 5 days. And if your fever is gone for 24 hours without fever reducers, then you can come back and you have to wear a mask for days 6 through 10. We're following the CDC guidelines. But of course, that means a lot more absenteeism. And when people aren't certain whether or not they have COVID or flu, they're doing the right thing, taking precautions, staying home. But that has really bumped up our needs for substitutes.
We don't live in the remote world that so many
Yeah.
other businesses,
work from home.
can supplement that way, which it makes a difference. We are hands-on.
And because we couldn't get substitutes, we had to increase how much we were paying substitutes, because we had none. We were scrambling. The administrators are covering classes. people were covering each other's classes and it was getting, almost grievable. It was getting bad. So we had to bump
So you
that.
don't have a pool per se to really.
We
go
always
from
have,
anywhere.
we always have a pool. In good economic times, our pool is tiny, and in bad economic times, our pool is growing. And it's actually an indicator that I use as to how bad things are. And all of a sudden, our pool is growing.
Yeah, just started to, yeah. Mhm. Thank you, Trent. If there's another category anybody would like to see, we're happy to click on it.
Utilities?
So one of the pluses of putting our middle school and high school together is that we're running fewer runs. It's basically a third of a reduction. So we were able to save some money there. And then, you know, we haven't been able, as you know, you've seen it on the news, there's a bus driver shortage. So we've been fortunate to be able to cover our runs, but it has not been without a challenge for M&J.
Is there a contract with M&J then for X amount of buses?
Yes,
How long is that contract?
5 years.
What year now is it on?
we are gonna be in the 5th year. We'll go out to, you know, market in the next, I don't know that we'll be able to go out to market, quite honestly, but
Are you
we'll be
looking
looking at
reducing
that.
them for less buses?
We have reduced by 2 in this contract that we're currently in. We're 2 fewer than what we used to have. And that's really a result of, we couldn't get drivers. Because the fewer number of drivers, the more ground the buses have to cover. And now we're running into the issue of timing to go from one run to the next run and having enough time in between to pick kids up and drop them off on time to school and vice versa in the afternoon. So it becomes, it sounds great because as you probably know, we have a lot of people who drive their kids.
It's
Unfortunately.
ridiculous. I'm sorry. I'm one sometimes.
No.
It's like the buses are, there's like 4 kids on a bus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's nothing-
You know?
yeah, we have to have those
It's-
seats available.
Our
Yeah,
rider,
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
you do, I know.
our ridership's
That's
between
crazy.
15 and 24% depending. It's low, but that's required.
Yeah.
And so we did reduce the number, but they have to cover more ground to do that. So it's a balancing act to make sure we can get
Makes
kids to time on. to
What we,
school.
what we had to cut this year, and I'm really frustrated by it, is we don't have a late bus. So if you're a kid who doesn't have a car and mom and dad work, we can't necessarily have you stay after and be parts of things because we can't get late bus drivers. But I would love to see that added back because that's an equity issue, you know?
Yeah.
Your mom and dad work all day, and you don't have a way of getting in and out of school other than the bus. You really are at a disadvantage.
So question, you're going into your 5th year. How are you gonna deal with the electric buses going into your new contract?
So they have not, there's not a lot of companies around, the big ones are, you know, putting some electric buses into motion. It'll be something that we'll have to look at, obviously, Rick. I just don't know that it's gonna be a money saver, quite honestly.
Don't even go there with me. I understand what you're saying, but I guess my concern is twofold. First of all, last time I knew the ROI for the electric buses would have to be a 7-year contract.
You can't do that. State statute
I know.
only allows you to 5,
So I'm not sure how they're gonna expect you to do it,
right?
but yet they're gonna come down on you if you don't. The other thing is this, in all honesty, the safety of them is very questionable in many areas as well.
I don't doubt it.
Yeah, the day that they released the announcement, we literally had the Hampton bus go up in flames.
Mhm.
And while I can't get into details on that, I can tell you that there's a lot of issues out there. And I think that there's gonna be a lot of challenges on it.
I agree. And I don't know with the current utility rates that's gonna necessarily be very helpful either. So there are a lot of,
solar.
there's a lot of consideration.
So have you looked at going to carbon neutral projects such as solar on the schools and
We
try to
have,
get some of the projects in place?
we did that with Carl, actually in conjunction with Carl about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Because schools don't get the same incentives that a business gets or a homeowner would get.
Right?
Yeah, which is all the tax breaks. We literally did not have a huge savings, quite honestly. It wasn't large enough to put panels all over our roofs where, you know, we've got to get to mechanicals and all of that. I think, you know, Carl and I actually talked recently about looking at, you know, whether or not it makes sense now. It's difficult with our buildings because when they did the study of how much, you know, we would actually gain from it, we couldn't really, we couldn't rely on it 100% by any means. It wouldn't generate enough because of the fact that the winters are producing so much less sunlight, as we've all seen the last couple of months. So the studies were, I would say, not in our favor, but we need to look at it again. It's been about 5 years, you know, kind of take
So
another look.
the YMCA, the last meeting that we had with them, they told us that they were at 100% solar right now. With what they have for arrays out there. Now, with that being said, okay, if you don't have room on the roofs, you've got all that room on the back side of the high school that's that back edge, back towards Maynard's that you can't do a lot with.
The
you know.
ledge, you mean all the ledged area?
Right,
Mhm.
you know, to be able to bring that up and actually do a whole line of them, you might make it worth your while at some point. It's something that I hate to say it, but with the energy prices going the way that it is, you gotta start thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
For everything,
Yeah.
because
We're gonna look at it again, you know,
I-
and bring in a couple.
I also think we have to wait and see. There are a couple pieces of legislation. I'm not sure if one passed last year with a slow implementation or if it's back up this year, but it was basically if you start any kind of a building project at all, you have to look at all of those things and you do have to put in EV stations outside of your school. So it's making sure we're marching along in line with that legislation, because sometimes it comes with money, I think is gonna be a strategic move on
well,
our.
right now, they are out there, you can get money through for EV.
Yeah,
Yeah,
But I'd be cautioned where you put them, number one,
Yeah.
but
I think these would be mandatory though, if you did any kind of work on this
well,
building.
they are, I'm on the committee that's actually deciding where they're gonna be allowed
Mhm.
and so forth, and I would strongly recommend you look at that. But the alternative energy, their carbon neutral
Mhm.
policy that they're pushing out now on any kind of renovations and or upgrades.
Mhm.
You know, I hate to say it, it's gonna come to a point where you're not gonna have a choice to look at something
Mm.
outside the box, so.
Yeah.
If you're not doing it, I would highly recommend you start because it's coming.
Yeah.
Anything else you wanna go back to the pie chart? Thank you. Anything else you wanna look at on the pie chart?
You know how many kids were using approximately late buses at middle school and high school? When you had to cut,
When we were running them.
yeah, about,
So, we were doing it in conjunction with the park and rec programs and youth and family services. So everybody that was staying after for a club or an activity. And at one point, we were up to, you know, 2 buses pretty full for like middle school. So, you know, they were probably, and they have to go all over
Yeah.
town, so they take much longer. So it was, if I recall, it was about 35 kids a bus, 40, you know, 40 kids. It was quite a few.
Yeah.
Is this club still offer like Zoom for their meetings? Because I know for a while they were doing
I think,
hybrid meetings.
yes, and I
the
think
high
some of
school
them
ones
do, yeah.
So
Yeah.
offers an opportunity for kids. to
Yeah.
participate.
Yes.
Some of them,
Yeah.
yeah.
Depending on what it is, right? Right.
Next page.
So again, another visual of the 4 kind of big drivers that we talk about in our budget, you know, salaries and benefits both up. Tuition and transportation are kind of a wash. And those, as you know, you've heard us say it 100 times, that's a snapshot in time. That was based on the current number of students we have outplaced and the current number of transportation needs that we had when the budget was put together. It's changed since then. It goes up, it goes down, and it will continue till next fall. So we settle, you know, back again start the year, and then it'll change throughout the year. They're just different student transportation needs that come to us depending on special education and other activities. This is what we were talking about earlier. You can see 12.03 is the state average. We came in at 11.5. You can see Old Saybrook, you know, against the state there on this chart?
If I could too, this was as of, we settled fairly early in the season, and these numbers were from the fall. I believe the state average has gone up. I know the state average has gone
I
up
think
since
it has
then.
since we put this together.
And some around us have settled, higher numbers.
So this is,
Yeah, history of teaching positions. Again, in this case, it's programming needs, student needs. So we are reducing by one certified staff member year over year, which will be resolved through attrition. There won't be any unemployment claims. And that's based on need. And the next one's you.
so, we put this slide together every year for you so that you can kind of see where we fall. This is what we call our per pupil expenditure and our average daily membership. So it takes into consideration what the enrollment is on an average over the course of a year against what our expenditures are, our regular program expenditures. So this number becomes important, obviously. We can see that if you're a town that has a higher ADM, that you're going to probably have a slightly lower per pupil, and that just, the math speaks for itself. But typically what we see is there are certain overhead costs, no matter how you slice it. And so the enrollment becomes a significant factor in figuring the per pupil expenditure. It's pretty consistent with where we've been. So this is the history of our health insurance. This is a really, really good story. Jan and I struggled through the growing pains of a collaborative. We're in this collaborative with 3 other communities like us, and obviously over time, what its goal is that we don't see double-digit increases, and that we hopefully see our increase less than trend. And you can see, we've had a pretty good run for a number of years now. And what's really interesting is if we look at our numbers against the state numbers, which you'll see in the next slide, you can see that we have really outperformed as a collaborative, and we have been able to stay below trend in the majority of this 10-year period, which is significant. And this tells a really big story. So if we were on the state plan right now, which I'm sure you've heard and read, and maybe you've heard others talk about, with our current census and enrollment in our current plan, the state plan would be costing us about $550,000 more per year than what we're currently paying.
Do you have any idea as to what percentage of districts use the state plan versus their own as we do?
I don't know, do you?
I heard the percentage a while ago, but what I heard recently was you have to commit for 2 years, a minimum of 2 years, and a number of people that have been in it are now jumping out of it. Because I don't think they've been happy. They're looking at 12 and 13 and 14% increases. So the last number I heard, Jim, it was more than I had thought. It was over the 50% mark.
A number of the folks negotiating contracts for unions were pushing for the
Yeah.
state plan.
Yeah.
We fought that battle 2 contracts ago, and it never looked attractive after that. So we only had to fight it once, and then their numbers started to look so bad that we didn't have to fight it anymore. And we knew because we were studying their system and their basis for allowing people in, and it was come one, come all, and it was a flat fee. And you can't do that, you're not studying their experience. And so it was going to hit rocks, and I believe it has right now.
I think those numbers, anybody that deals with health insurance, I know Leanne is certainly one that does, the $2,000 a month per family. And of course, remember that our teachers have skin in that game. They pay a percentage of that. So that's the total premium. And then they pay 20% or so of the cost. So that's, that's a significant savings to the town over and above the 550,000, just premium to premium.
Okay, Mr. A, I think you are on the bargaining committee for the teachers, or the administrator?
Administration.
Administration, okay. I was gonna ask you, just as one of those folks that takes advantage of this, do you feel that the plan that you're being offered by Old Saybrook is meeting your needs?
Yeah, definitely. It's one of the better plans, I think. I talked to colleagues in other districts, yeah, we'll take care of it.
And it's an HSN.
Yeah,
so,
they just say we contribute, but
Yeah.
it's a good plan.
Everybody has skin in the game.
Question, or in the future, when you do these charts, could we also see by town how many professionals as opposed to non-professional positions each town has to see where we fall in line with everybody?
But which chart are you speaking?
I was looking back at the
Certified staff.
right, we're looking at teaching positions and
Sure.
so forth. I'm looking at, we went down to 141 from 142 last year. But what does that really mean, as opposed to,
For context.
right,
Yeah,
The total. So you want
Right.
to see certified and non.
right,
yeah, but for,
well, for each town too. Let's see what-
Yeah,
what's the staff?
we can see if we can get that.
We can get that from a few people. We'll be able to get it
Yeah.
collected annually.
Yeah. So, all right, so this is back to Pam, the general expenditures, and again, this is an interactive slide. If you have questions on it, then you can take it away.
So the other ones, the big pie that we looked at, had in larger groups. This breaks it down a little bit differently, but it is still the same, backup slides. Formatting of comparing different categories. For instance, Trent, if you want to click on professional learning,
Sure.
you'll see a significant increase in professional development for the upcoming year. That includes $30,000 that we need to train our staff for that science of reading pilot. And that's just for the pilot. So that $100,000 that we spoke of for that program that we need to put in place, that we have to put in place, is going to require $30,000 of training for our staff and $70,000 in materials to pilot the program that we're going to have to put in place. So that's a large contribution to our increase of something that we don't have control over. They're telling us what we have to do. They're limiting what our choices are. And from what I've heard, we are already very successful in our reading level of that grade of students. However, they're mandating it across the states, regardless of what your current levels are. So that is one example. Trent, do you want to go back?
And that's lion's share of that increase.
It is. We also have software and workbooks. Excellent option. Technology licensing. As we transition to e-textbooks, and that's what we are doing, we still have the textbook piece of things found in that category. We do only have one new adoption for next year, so we were able to realize a savings in textbooks and workbooks. And that number has come down considerably from past years when everything was a hard copy book. However, where we found increases is technology licensing. We're having more student-driven exploratory experiences. So, for instance, the local history class that Jan was talking about at the middle school, they have, it's a generic, it's not identified with one person, ancestry.com. So what they do is they will go to the cemetery on College Street and they'll find a name and they'll go to ancestry.com and they dig into it there. And then they go to the Historical Society. And then so we have many resources for software and licensing that allows for different things. Included in that are also the things that run the district, the IEP software, the evaluation software, is in addition there, our website, our accounting system, our student data system, as well as the instructional pieces of things. It includes, you know, what we need to run our servers. So it's extensive and growing. However, I want you to understand that we go through each and every of over 200 and some odd licenses, one by one. We go back to the teachers. Is it instructional? Are you still using it? Is it giving you what you need? And there are several that come off each year and several that we might try and add to see if that will give some experiences that they're looking for. But each one is vetted each year to make sure that we're not in those commercials. What do you have a subscription that keeps going that you forget about? So I want you to understand that we are tracking them very closely, so we don't get into that situation, because that's a big number if you weren't to control it.
And a couple of them in the past, just recent past, that are larger licenses are the cybersecurity that was required by our insurance carrier. So we've had, again, that was a $25,000 ticket that you have to have it. I mean, town had to do it too. You know, you don't have choices over some of those. They're just coming our way, and we have to add them in.
So Trent, if you want to go back, if there's any others in particular, you might want to take a look at. It is interactive. Okay.
And then finally, the next slide talks about what is included in our budget for capital. You can see we have kind of divided it among the 4 locations. Goodwin, we're gonna just probably have to do one of the playground areas because the air conditioning, there'll be some saw cutting through one of the areas in the back, and we'll try to you know, obviously patch that and then seal it afterwards, so it's in good condition for kids to be able to play on. That's the biggest one there. There's also
So you're just talking about filling this sock crack?
No. This, after that's filled with the project, then we're gonna seal coat the entire back play area, which is pretty good size. The middle school, again, if you've driven the parking lot, that one, we're hoping to do that one more time before it has to be repaved. It's getting pretty rough, but we'll try to squeeze one more resurface, sealing and striping on that. And then, the high school, there's the classroom at the high school that still has asbestos flooring in it, which is in need of coming up because it's starting to really heave. It was the wood shop, which is really more of our technology education area now. And so it's an old parquet floor. It was just like the one that was in the gym before that was removed. It does have asbestos underneath. And so that'll have to be done through an asbestos removal. And then we don't plan on putting a floor down because it's a concrete slab. We'll just sand, you know, the slab so that it's smooth and paint it. And that's what that floor will be made of. And then they have the need, any of our sports enthusiasts that have been at the games, a new scoreboard in there is in desperate need to be replaced, and the shot clocks as well. And that's an actual proposal that we're looking at putting out for bid. And then finally, one segment of the curtain in the auditorium is, you know, when the kids come out and they bring scenery and whatever, over time, they become pretty tattered. So we're gonna have to replace the legs of that curtain as well. And then finally, this building has the original AC unit outside that we did kind of paste together this past summer. So we're thinking that it's about 30 years old, 28 years old. So it's definitely given us our money's worth. So it's time for that to be updated.
Julie, the high school gym work, some of that is mandatory, right? Because right now, the CIAC just instituted that for next year for basketball, right? The shot clock.
Well, the
So-
shot, yeah.
So you
You
have to
do it-
put those
you
in,
kind
it's
of-
not an option,
Right,
right?
they don't want like
Yeah.
the manual,
Right.
you know,
Yeah,
timing anymore. So, yeah, some of that's become, again, you know, these are things that we try to keep up. There are just so many pieces of equipment and technology and things that change that, you know, they're not small tickets. They just aren't.
What's the trim painting? What's involved in that?
So, the ceiling and the walls, you know, we did the floor this past year. Hopefully you noticed that. It's beautiful. It came out so nice. But now we need to do the walls. They haven't been done in about 15 years. It's time, you know, to freshen them up. They're in need for sure. And then our athletic director is looking at some revamping of the banners to make them hang nicely and look, you know, really look professional when we're done with that, so.
I think it's money well spent. If you go to the basketball game in 25 minutes, some places, everyone's there.
Yeah.
But no sound panels in good one yet, right?
No sound panels.
So just to end our presentation, we're happy to answer any questions that you have, but we hope that you see that we understand our fiscal responsibility to the taxpayer, and we do our best every year to make sure that we are being mindful of that. Struggling this year with the same things that we are all struggling with, which is cost increase of everything. We still need to deliver the program because kids in senior year or third grade or kindergarten, this is their one and only year. And we can't apologize later and say, sorry, we weren't able to create that program for you or have that program for you. So we still advocate for those programs to make our kids college career ready. And to sustain them and grow them each year to meet the kids' needs in increasingly complex times. Thank you very much. And please, we'd be happy to take more questions if you have them.
Question, back on page 8, where it tells where all the students went through different classes. I see there was no Navy, so was that, nobody went into the Navy?
Right.
So if these two pages 7 and 8 do just tell you exactly where everybody went at the start, as they left school last year.
Do we allow the military to come on campus
law.
to recruit?
By law.
Wasn't sure where that was today. so.
Yes, legally, we are required to allow them on to recruit, and they do.
Thanks.
So I'm not sure how much Carl talked to you folks about or the individual administrators at some point. Town hall's looking at a whole new system too for their AC. There are a lot of things coming up. There's a lot of increases that you've been made aware of that are coming up. And, you know, I know you've done your due diligence here. I would personally request that you come up with some options on what you could give up, because the PD is going to be asked the same thing, because times are tough. And if we were to just push everything into the budget and so forth, the amount that the mill rate would go up would definitely get some attention. I would suggest that you come up with some suggestions for the Board of Selectmen to work it out with him, so that personally, we don't have to as a board, we'd rather not. We're supportive of the school system, always have been, as we have in the past, and we want to see you succeed. But we've also got to balance that with what the town residents can deal with too. It's just a suggestion. It's a suggestion for me in talking with other members and the selectmen as well. So that being said, I would just suggest it. And then pick your battles, you know, where you think you gotta go. Oh, sorry, go ahead. No, the other thing is I just ask continuously for the transparency. I've said that year after year, and there's still things that I don't understand how it still happens. We had a request of $180,000 for cameras, and we find out that you got $20,000 from a grant. Nobody told any of us that you received $20,000 from that grant.
We haven't received it yet.
But you didn't even tell us you were applying for it, so we even knew about it.
Carl did it with us, in conjunction with us. We did it together.
And well, that's not what, we weren't told of it. And we're the ones that have to make that decision too. So it just, at face value, it doesn't look good, is what I'm trying to still say to, you know, to let us know. Please just let us know. We're not gonna give you a hard time about it. We just don't want it to be a surprise, and that to us. some of us was surprised, because we questioned a lot about the camera system. But that's a, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And this is obviously very minor, it's more not budget really related, but my thought. The high school football program with what's gonna happen next year, does that save or cost money?
We think it's gonna save a little.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with transportation or how that ends up working out, but we think it's going to save.
Is that an equal, I guess, in terms of like funding? Is it an equal co-op or is it gonna be, is the
By
funding gonna be
student.
based on
It's
water
gonna
students
be
who
per
pay?
student,
Okay.
yeah, because it's an unequal number from each
Right.
school, like Westbrook's got one, Clinton has a little bit more than we do, so there will be a price assigned per athlete.
Just curious.
Yeah, no, good question, yeah, it was presented as a slight money saver,
Yeah, it's a great idea.
yeah, it's that way,
Better
they're
than
safe,
folding.
absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Julian, Jan, this is Jerry. I just want to say thank you for hosting us. I'm sorry that the chair and vice chair weren't on. Apparently, I don't know what happened, but I just want to say thank you for hosting us. And we will probably talk again soon.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you guys for coming.
Of course,
The middle school floor actually was done last summer, right?
Yeah.
It was just
Yeah.
refinished?
Yeah.
How long typically does that,
10 years.
10 years? And then, so in 10 more years, when the middle school has to get done, is it gonna be
New
a
floor,
new floor, right? That's the.
the third
can't do
time
it again.
done.
Yeah,
you know, these buildings are, which we love, they're in use all the time, you know, our kids' programs, the community, and they're the biggest buildings in town, so they get a lot of use and so every 10 years. there's like
oh, I know, I
a
live in
redo.
those gyms right now.
How big?
3 children and they wanna go from middle school to game today, quick dinner to the high
High
school,
school.
like,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I don't blame you, I'd go too if I didn't have a meeting.
Could I just ask one question? The population of the school children went down again. And I'm wondering what percentage of the available school children in town goes to our district schools?
It's very high.
And over time, if that percentage has stayed the same with the decreasing number of kids going in here, or if it's fluctuated dramatically.
No, we have a significant, no, it has not. If anything, and the only number I know I have that is accurate is the number of students we're losing once they're going to the high school level. That number has dropped dramatically. Most of our students stay in Old Saybrook to go to high school.
Yeah, but I'm focusing more on the total pie.
Yeah,
What percentage of the total pie have we been getting over, say, the last 15 years? Because I think I remember when I first joined, we had 1,450 or 1,500 kids in the school. Is that possible?
that's right, yep,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'm just wondering if you can measure, go on a cycle, 5-year cycle, and see what happened as that percentage drops. I mean, laws change, competition comes in, and how we can react to that, because we can't keep dropping the way we're dropping.
So, right, but it's not, that's not the cause. The cause is that we are graduating classes of 120 and our kindergarten classes are 60 and 70. So it's just,
I know that's the problem.
it's not, we are not losing students in a larger number to competitor schools like Xavier, Mercy, Magnets.
I think
If
So the
anything,
pie has shrunk, is that what you're
the
saying?
overall pie has shrunk.
In
it's
our
state,
town,
it's
the pie has
statewide,
shrunk.
it's not just Old Saybrook.
It's mostly statewide. You have a
Yeah.
couple of towns that are bucking that trend. One, interestingly enough, being South Windsor. But everything in this region of the state, these types of communities, your enrollment is going down precipitously.
Huh? That's true.
Some of the bigger industry up there, I think, is drawing a lot of that.
Probably, I look at it.
They have to build schools right now.
Yeah, how many out of district kids are we taking care of now?
Education.
As for special ed, you know, what we talked about?
Seven or eight. Well, is your question, how many are coming from other schools to Old Saybrook?
Yes,
We don't have any right now.
okay, so nobody's paying for,
No.
Okay, so that account's still roughly where it was, is what you're saying? The account that was running,
Right, we're using a very large portion of that for the air conditioning project.
So we don't have to go out to bond on that.
I thought that had to come before us so that we had some intake.
That, not that account does not. That one does not. This is a different account, I think, right? The one that has
Yeah.
700,000.
Yeah.
The one that has $1 million has to go before the Board of Finance. This is one of their accounts.
And we will be coming to you for a portion of that as well, for the air conditioning.
Just a little bit though.
Yes, well, we put in what, 2 something at the end of the year, 240 something, and we need basically almost that exact amount to finish the project.
Julie, how long is the air conditioning projects for the 3 schools gonna take?
Well, let me just say,
A year?
Got a crystal ball?
let me just say, this project's about 1.8 million for Goodwin. The middle school is upwards of 3 million, and the high school probably similar to the middle school, and I don't think we have any funding for those 2 projects at this point. So, yes, crystal ball is definitely needed.
Any other grants out there that you've applied for and heard anything of or are pending?
We put a grant application in for Goodwin, which we hopefully will get a small amount of that one back.
The air
And we'll-
conditioning.
Yeah, and we'll bring that to you when and if we get it. We also put that in for the middle school, but what that required was the town had to take a formal vote, as you remember, this was all presented to you, on the funding, which had to happen like now, and I don't see that $3 million
No.
coming out of a hat anywhere, so that one we won't be able to move forward more than likely, so that's the grant right now. Rick, my guess is districts are gonna be in the same boat we are, that, the funding had to come up so quick that who can, put that together when their numbers are $3 to $5 million on average in many school buildings. So I'm hopeful that there'll be continual funding, like there was for the safety and security grants. This is round 6 coming up. Like they
Yeah,
just keep putting them out there.
But on this topic, I'm on the indoor air quality committee, that Senator Duff put together. That we're meeting 2 more times and they're ready to go forward with the report to the legislators. And I think that based on what I'm seeing, they're going to push forward a requirement for air conditioning. They're gonna push forward a requirement for certain levels of heat and humidity in all school buildings. Whether or not that comes with funding remains to be seen.
I'm glad you said that because the bill that I saw also says that they're gonna require a 2/3 vote on anything, on any project that is mandated by legislators that does not have a funding source with it.
Yeah, well,
So,
there'll be a funding source, but it won't be enough money for districts to do. If you extrapolate 3 million and 1.8 million, another 3 million, and then multiply that by 160 towns that had air conditioning projects that they needed to do, we're gonna have a problem. And I'm very concerned. I'm a bit of a lone wolf on this committee. It has a lot of labor people, OSHA people, teachers unions. And clearly, we're all in favor of comfortable school buildings for children and staff, but I'm the one saying, where's the money? Like, who's paying for this?
They're big
Because
numbers.
they're huge
Yeah.
numbers, huge numbers.
and you're absolutely right. And what's crazy is the amount of money that's coming out of Hartford right now across the board. I don't know where they're printing it, but it's coming out. And it's not the things that you would expect.
It's in the unicorn budget, surplus.
Yeah.
So, we'll bring those grants to you, Rick.
Just,
If-
all we ask is to be made aware of them.
Sure.
Because, when you hear about it and then you find out, oh yeah, we already got it. Or we're just waiting for the funding, or, it's like. We just like to know is what I'm saying.
Sure.
Good, I don't have any more questions. Got it? Anybody have any more questions? I want to be formal then.
Make sure you get it right the first time.
Julie usually has all the answers. Oh, and superintendent.
Are you moving
I
to?
guess we don't have any more questions, so we'll just say goodbye.
That's good. Motion to adjourn.
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 Okay.
Thank you.